Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love, it never will end. Try it with me. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love, it never will end. Give him thanks for the fruitful earth, for the sun, the seasons, the rain, for the joys of his good creation, the life and breath he sustains. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love, it never will end. Sing to him, sing your praise to him, tell the world of all he has done. Fill the nations with celebrations to welcome him as he comes. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love, it never will end. Let the heavens rejoice before him, the earth and all it contains. All creation in jubilation, join in the shout, the Lord reigns. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love, it never will end. In the third verse, when it says, let all creation in jubilation join in the shout, the Lord reigns, I give you permission. You may shout. You don't have to. No requirements here, no expectations, but you may shout. It is quite appropriate. There is a lot of shouting going on in the Bible, and I suspect when we get to heaven, there will be quite a bit of shouting. Let the heavens rejoice before him, the earth and all it contains. All creation in jubilation, join in the shout, the Lord reigns. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love, it never will end. We'll come back to that, so hang on to it. The reign of God is something that is totally unique, and the Ten Commandments are setting that up. So let's have a look at the first commandment, as Pastor Kevin has suggested. The time that it was written was about 1300 BCE. So that's a long time ago. That's 3,300 years ago, more. Culture was quite different. It was in the Middle East. Middle East in those days was called the Ancient Near East, or we call it that. It's Iraq, Iran, Palestine, all the way down to Egypt. So it's a huge region that is still heavily populated with people. Some of the culture is the same, particularly the Persian culture, which has continued in Iran, but many things have changed. In the day that the Ten Commandments were written, there was an exchange between leaders and people that consisted of making an agreement. Now, that's not too unlike what happens today. When Justin Trudeau agreed to be Prime Minister, he had to make some statements about his loyalty to Canada and his attempt to do his best on our behalf. Other leaders of other countries have done that. Some leaders of some countries have no intention of doing that, and that's scary. There's agreements between people. We do that commonly today as well. We make agreements with a partner for life to be faithful to one another. We make business agreements. We make agreements for employment. So here we have the Ten Commandments. It starts out in verse 1 of Exodus 20 by saying, the Lord God spoke these words. And so they're sometimes called the 10 words. We read in Exodus that Moses went up a mountain and God wrote these commandments down on stone. Would have been a little bigger than this, maybe about 20 inches across and up and down. You had to get 10 commandments there after all. I've begun to scribble on here. It says in Exodus 31, verse 8, that the finger of God wrote these commandments. When they etched onto stone, it would be done with a chisel, and sometimes a bit of dye would be put in to make it a little clearer to read. We have a lot of documents from the ancient Near East, and this was a common way of expressing an agreement in those days. It's getting heavy. So this says, La Yahweh lo Elohim. Well, being translated, it means, to yourselves have no other gods in front of my face. It's literally what it says. It's one of my favorite expressions in the Old Testament of God's presence, my face. In Psalm 27, it says, do not hide your face from me, O God. And the idea is, because of my sin, O God, you might hide your face from me, but don't. This commandment says that we are not to put anything between our face and God's. Now, interestingly, there were 10 commandments. Not a whole lot of people could read and write in those days. And so there was a great deal of use of memory. And I checked it out. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How handy is that? No other gods, no idols, no, what was the third one? Help me. Don't use the God's name in vain. Remember the Sabbath, and on for 10. I don't think that was an accident. I think that was on purpose. The intent is that we would remember what God requires of us, and it would get into our hearts and our minds. It would stay there, and as we go about our activities, it could be in our minds that we're to have no other gods before the great God. Beg your pardon here. The other thing that they did, now, was to take clay, wet clay, and they would etch onto the wet clay, and it was literally about 5 inches around. It was held in your hand. Now, watch this for a second. A tablet, a handheld tablet. We don't change much, do we? Now, there's some purpose to this. We now use paper and books, right? So we can have God's commandments to us before us in a book. So that's changed a bit, although we still do use tablets, do we not? And we need to remember what God says to us. It needs to be there all the time, reminding us of what God's desire is for us. And once in a while, we would want to renew that. Just a little aside. Do you remember when Moses got down from the mountain the first time? He busted them up, didn't he? He got mad and he broke them. So he had to go back up the mountain again. And it says in Exodus 34, verse 1, that God made 2 copies with his finger. This one's a little small. It would have been bigger. And Moses brought them back down. And eventually, these 2 copies were put in the Ark of the Covenant, right, which went with them, the box that was built. Now, there were 2 parties to this agreement. There was God, and there was God's people. So there were 2 copies. There really were. There were 2 copies, one for God, one for the people. God didn't have a shelf to put it on, so they put the whole gear into the box, into the Ark of the Covenant, and on they went as God's people. So there must be something incredibly significant about what God says here. So let's spend a few moments with that. This is not an illustration. Exodus 20, verse 1, then the Lord God spoke these words. It's me, says God, I am is my name, the great God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery. Now, here is the first part of an ancient Near Eastern agreement. This is the way it was done in all countries. The author, the king, the queen, would identify themselves. God identifies God's self by saying, I'm the one that brought you out of slavery. The implication there is, and it's going to be made more specific later in Exodus, is that it was all done out of kindness and grace. These people didn't deserve what God was doing, but God chose in grace to bring them out of servitude into the promised land. The next thing that comes then is verse 3, which is the agreement, what the stipulations are that God requires. God says, I require that you not have anything between my face and yours. That's what no other gods means. So let's spend a few moments on that. It's an exclusive relationship that God wants us to have. Now, some of the common things that get in between our face and God's, well, that could be one. Fortune. Maybe fame. Things that we do. Things that we want. Those are some of the things that we might want and fill our lives with, and it gets in between us and God's face. God says, don't do that. There's some other things that we do that can be quite honorable, and yet they get in the way. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how we, at least I, have tended to let activities get in between me and God's face, the things that I'm trying to accomplish. And if this were me, with a bit of resource in me, God's love, it gets poured out to others. And if there were something in the way, I'll just let you imagine that, and I was trying to pour water into here, trying to let God fill me up, it's not going to happen, is it? There's something between me and God. And when I go to pour myself out for somebody, oh dear. Have you ever been like that? Just empty. You've got some good things to do, but you go for the resource and, God says, don't do that. Don't put stuff between me and your face. Let's be right face to face with each other. Well, there's sometimes things that we feel that get in the way. We can feel all sorts of human emotions commonly, and we do. We feel afraid, we feel excited, we feel guilty, we feel angry, enraged, we feel ashamed. And sometimes those common things get in between our face and God's. And, well, we get really empty and hurting. Sometimes we can even nourish those things. Have you ever caught yourself doing that? Feeding those negative emotions because you're so disturbed and angry. Sometimes we experience loss, and unintentionally we feed that. And it gets in between our face and God's. God says in this first commandment, it's me, I am the great God. Don't put anything between my face and yours. Have no other gods. Sometimes there's stuff that's other people's stuff, and that gets in between. You're aware, I'm sure, of other people's expectations on you. That's a common thing too, isn't it? When we're young, our parents maybe express expectations on us. As we get older, we might have some expectations on our aging parents. And on it goes. And sometimes those expectations get between us and God's face. And we get empty and we can't see God. And God says, take it away. Don't do that. Okay, take it away. Don't do that? Oh, help. That's right, help. Please help, God. There are many ways in which we can remedy this situation, always with the work of the Spirit of God involved. I've been a social worker and a therapist for a long time, and one of my favorite therapy approaches is called cognitive behavioral therapy, in which you identify some things that are going on in your life. There are two really important things in changing our behavior. Number one is to be self-aware, to become aware of what it is that you're putting in between your face and God's, or what somebody else has put there. I was asked one time to go and see a resident. I've got to put this delicately. The resident was behaving inappropriately, and it was affecting other people in the community and two particular care aides. So I'm kind of a specialist in inappropriate behavior. Don't misunderstand me. So off I went to see this gentleman, and my approach usually in those situations was to discover whether or not there was self-awareness in play. So I said to this gentleman, how's it going? Good. I said, well, is it going okay between you and the people that are helping you? Oh yeah. How about between, and I mentioned the two care aides' names, and he goes, yeah, we're great. And I thought, oh, God help. He is not aware. He is not aware of his behavior and what it's doing. So the conversation went on, and I gently but firmly confronted him with the behavior. He acknowledged it, and we worked out a plan for him to change. The first thing for our change is always being aware, being self-aware, being aware that you're so angry that you can barely see God's face, or so hurt, or whatever the case may be. Or, gosh, I'm 70 years old. I've been doing this a long time. I don't know how many times this has been me. It's frightening. When I was 39, there weren't even drops in the glass. It was so empty and dry, and I was scared to death what was happening to me. We can find ourselves in a place where there is something between us and God, not necessarily that we believe in other gods or something, but just our simple human behavior. And there are ways to go about changing that. There was a pastor one time. She was dry like that, and she went to see a counselor, and they talked. And in the conversation, this pastor was saying how she felt so distant from God. Like, she'd try to talk to God, and it was like silence. She read the Bible, but she wasn't hearing from God. She was just worn out. And so in this conversation, they shared back and forth a bit. And the therapist said, have you, in a time in your life, I'm sure you have, when you felt really close to God? And the pastor said, yes. Oh, yes. And so the counselor said, tell me about it. So the pastor said, well, I was on a cruise. It was just beautiful. We were out on the ocean, and we hadn't seen land for a long time, and it was so wonderful. There was nothing else going on, just where we were. And she said, I went out on the deck one night, and I went to a part of the deck where there were no lights shining. And I laid down on my back, and I looked at the cloudless sky, and the little spots of light of the stars. There's no moon either. I felt so close to God. It was like, God, you are immense. God, you are so good. I love you. And so the counselor said, do that some more then. Maybe you don't need to go on a cruise, but find things that help you feel close to God. That's good advice. I got that advice when I was 39 from the counselor that I went to. For me, it's riding my bicycle. I ride a bicycle like a crazy man. I used to commute to, Laura, I used to commute to Smith Creek from my home in Lake Country. It was 37.4 kilometers. I measured it. I could do it on a good day in an hour and 40 minutes. That was, I think, my best time. I just flew. I did it winter and summer. On my worst day, like in one winter, it took me 2.5 hours to get to work. That helps me in my life a lot. I still ride a bicycle like a crazy man. Well, I used to ride 15,000 kilometers a year when I was commuting.
I'm down to only about 6,000 or 7,000 kilometers now. On my bicycle that I bought when my son was 16, which is, I don't know, it's a long time ago, there are now 170,000 kilometers on that bicycle. It's mostly retired. It's kind of my trail bike. During COVID, I bought a new road bike, and so it's pretty young now. Yeah. Do stuff that helps you feel close to God. It's different for each of us. For some of you, it's going to be music. Listening to symphony, listening to rock music, listening to folk music, whatever genre you like. Maybe it's making music. When I was a pastor in Toronto in a street church and I was really tired, I used to come home and watch television. And I'd watch, there were no movies on in those days, just, hour-long programs, which were stupid and tiring. And I'd end up feeling worse after than before. So I asked God, what should I do? Because, this is between my face and yours, God. There's a problem here. And so I really felt like God led me to my accordion, which I've been playing since I was 9 years old. And I would sit in the basement and I would play for an hour and then 2 and sing my heart out. And I felt so much better and was able to let God pour, a little bit of love in because there wasn't so much between him and me. That was not an illustration. Find things that help you be close to God. Become aware of what's between you and God's face. And be kind to yourself. This is part of it too, the self-compassion. You can become aware of something that's gotten in between you and God, and you can beat yourself up. Do you ever, I used to have the pleasure of working with young people who were finishing their education, and in one case it was a social worker who'd finished her education at UBC, and she was working with me. We worked together for a couple of years, and she was very sensitive to my talk and my self-talk. Do you ever catch yourself going, idiot? No, of course you don't. Maybe dummy, I don't know. In my sleep, when I wake up in the night and I've had a really nasty dream and I'm not feeling very happy about life, I can say the awfulest things to me about how I'm not coping well with things. Now, I don't know. I'm not going to ask for hands to be raised, but this is a common thing. We talk to ourselves, and sometimes it's very negative. We don't look after ourselves. So my friend, the young social worker, said, David, I hear your inner critic. And I said, yeah, it's got a big, deep voice, and it uses very few words like, you dummy. She said, well, you need to listen to your inner cheerleader. And I said, hot dog, that sounds good. I don't know her. We need to be kind to ourselves. When we become aware of something that isn't working, that's between us and God's face, be compassionate on yourself. Be kind and loving the way that you probably are to other people. Most important. Okay, so first commandment, first word that we have in this list of 10. Remember 10? So ladies, when you're painting your toenails, there's 10, right? You can repeat, remind yourself. The first one is, you shall not have for yourself any other gods in front of my face. Quite graphic, isn't it? When Jesus takes this commandment, because in the 10 Commandments it's very brief and graphic and explicit, there's no room for argument, right? No other gods, no idols, no using God's name in vain. The first positive one is remember the Sabbath, the fourth one. When Jesus picks this up, he's going to flip it over into the positive and inspire people to fall in love more deeply with God and to keep this word. And so Jesus says in Matthew 22, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, that is everything that is you, and with all your strength. Jesus picks it up, puts it in the positive, and inspires us. And he does some really surprising things. He says that our love for God is going to be seen in our behavior with other people. And so there are no bounds to whom we express the love of God. The stranger, the enemy, love your enemy, Jesus says in Matthew 5. The poor, the undesirable. Jesus goes on to say that not only is it boundless, but it is intensely within and intimate. So he says, you've heard it said, don't commit murder. But I say to you, don't even be angry. Do you see how Jesus takes this commandment and expands it so powerfully and beautifully? Don't have anything between your face and God's. Because when there isn't anything, you better pray for me here. We're not doing this on our own, are we? Our love for God is something that God is pouring into us. I hope I don't electrocute myself, because I don't plan on stopping. Okay, you get the idea. We're not in this on our own. When God says, I want you to love me and others, God is pouring that love into us. And that's where Carly's warning came in at the earlier part of the service. She says, warning, it will overflow. And then it just gets filled up over and over and over. As a pastor acquaintance of mine in Cincinnati, he's about my age, a little bit younger, and he started something in his church called Random Acts of Kindness. His name is Steve Sjogren and his wife Janie. And they started letting God's love overflow in their neighborhood like we do. And one of the things they did was they went to the local liquor store in Cincinnati, and they went inside and asked the owner, could they please wash his windows? And he goes, yeah, sure, how much? They said, no, it's free. We want to serve you. That's all they said. So they washed his windows. And when they finished, he said, I know how this works. It was free today, but you'll be back and you'll be wanting money. They came back. He said, how much? They said, this is a free expression of the love of God. We can't help ourselves. We want to wash your windows. And he goes, that's weird, but sure, okay. So this kept on for 3 months. They kept washing this liquor store's windows. One day, the owner was talking to them, and he said, you know what, I haven't been to church for years. I used to go. I went last Sunday, and God was there. This God that you said is so kind and overflowing in love. God says to us, don't put anything between your face and mine. Clear it away. Here, I'll help you. Love me. Here, I'll pour the love in. Love me. Madly in love was one of our songs, wasn't it? Thanks, Sean. That was good. God is madly in love with us. Somebody asked me if I brought notes. I did by a mistake today, but let me read you a wet poem that I wrote. Barbara, my wife, was away for quite a lengthy time helping her sister in Toronto. And while she was away, I was doing lots of Bible study, and this is a poem that I wrote her. It occurred to me as I was studying about God's love in Deuteronomy 6, where it says, listen, O Israel, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. I could imagine that this is how God thinks of us. It certainly is how I think of my spouse. My love, I'm excited by you, so it's you that I pursue. To be near you is what I yearn for, to be gifted with your faithful love, to present my devotion to you, unshaken, unashamed, holding you, desiring to be knit to you, just me, nothing hidden, nothing pretended. I desire to be knit to you, woven into a richly colored tapestry. I'm obsessed by affectionate, passionate desire for you. You're lovely. You can imagine that God would be saying that to you, wouldn't you? Our love for each other as humans in so many ways teaches us about the love of God, which is overflowing. This is a kingdom that has never occurred before or since. Going back to the beginning about these agreements between a leader and a people, there were many agreements made over time. There has never been an agreement like this one. The kingdom of our God, the Lord reigns, is one of love that defies description and invites stories and activity and experience. I'd like to do that song I started with again, and you may again shout, "The Lord reigns." Just a little bit of instruction. When we sing, it's kind of like playing as if. Are you full of love for God and you love God with all your heart, soul, and strength? I want to. We want to. It sometimes seems so beyond. When we sing, we're actually like children playing as if it were the case. When we shout out, "The Lord reigns," we're meaning to say, let's just pretend that it's real and God reigns in my life. You get it, don't you? God does, but there's all these gaps that need filling in. We play when we sing at a reality that we want. So play with me for a minute. Where is it? Oh. This is an old accordion and the key is stuck. We'll start here.
Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love it never will end. Give him thanks for the fruitful earth, for the sun, the seasons, the rain, for the joys of his good creation, the life and breath he sustains. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love it never will end. Sing to him, sing your praise to him, tell the world of all he has done. Fill the nations with celebrations to welcome him as he comes. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love will never end. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for his love it never will end. Let the heavens rejoice before him, the earth and all it contains. Ready? All creation in jubilation, join in the shout, "The Lord reigns!" Oh, give thanks to the Lord,